Hello and welcome to Glorious Purpose, the Loki reaction show from the Comic Crush. I am Paul, this is Liz. If you don't know us by now, you've obviously missed the last 5 episodes. Do go back and have a look at those. We're great. We're great on this.
Watch them again.
Yeah, watch them 5 or 6 times from different IP addresses, preferably. No, do have a look. There is now, by the time you watch this, there should be a complete box set of our Loki experience for this second season of the show. And I hope you've got a kick out of us kind of trying to guess what was going to happen, who was who was a variant, who was not, who was time slipping and who was not. And obviously now that we've watched episode 6 and you've watched episode 6, you know that we were completely wrong about every single thing. Well, nearly.
Most things.
We kind of got some things sort of right. We were I like to think of us as correct adjacent, Liz.
We were mostly correct on a different timeline. There is a reality in which we were completely correct.
I don't know who to blame, Liz. I don't know if it's our fault or Marvel's.
I think it was actually a deft bit of storytelling on their part, because it was very difficult to really foresee what was going to happen.
There's some issues I have with that, which we'll try and get to somewhere in the middle. I won't say the end, but somewhere in the middle. I mean, we're back when the episode opens up. We are back in the TVA just before it all went tits up. We've got Victor Timely heading out onto the gangway, where he's spaghettified again immediately. And Loki has to go back in time. I think one of the things the episode shows us is that the value of comedy, or that you can get a lot of comedy out of repetition.
Sure.
And also that you can get a lot of tragedy out of repetition as well, as we see later on. I found all those sequences right at the beginning, with Loki hopping back again and again and again. I actually really like them, and I think Hiddleston obviously really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, he got to kind of use his comedy chops a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, he really just kind of owned that whole segment of the show, and really this whole episode, to be honest. We'll get into why as we go along, but this was like, finally, one of my minor concerns over the course of the season is like, oh, we're not getting enough Loki. And this episode made up for that big time, tenfold, really. And it really became his story again.
Yeah. One of the interesting things I found about not so much making it so Hiddleston-centric, but doing that repetitious comedic thing is only funny to us. It's not funny to the characters inside the moment. I mean, I'm sure they're having individual moments of comedy, but when you think about it, dramatically, they can't know that this is happening again and again and again. I mean, obviously, Mobius kind of, gets wind of something, but it's only funny when you're looking at it from the outside.
Right.
Which I guess, I don't know what you call that. What objective comedy?
Maybe,
or subjective comedy. But it's interesting that it's kind of only, it's there, that is for the audience only, rather than the characters in the show.
Right. The characters who must be, particularly Loki, must be extremely frustrated to have to relive the same moment 10,000 plus times.
I wonder how much they reshot in terms of, did they just have him do lots of different moments in that scene and then select editing wise what to reuse and reuse, or I wonder if they honed it right down at the script stage and they knew what bits were going to be like again. And I like that. I really enjoy
Yeah, and
it.
mostly it's timely spaghettifying over and over and over again.
Yeah, I just really enjoyed that.
It's the real like Groundhog Day heavy portion of the episode, you know. And you know, it's Loki trying to figure out, you know, like going through stages. Okay, well, what can we do differently? And at first it's like, oh, it needs to be faster. Then he's like, no, it needs to be earlier. Then, you know, it's okay, well, no, we have to do, you know, I have to go back at this point. And, you know, so it's him going through all these permutations. And finally it's like, oh, well, in order to, you know, really achieve this, how long would it take me to master, you know, a complete knowledge of physics and mechanics? And it's like, well, decades, centuries. Then it's like centuries later.
Yeah. Which I really liked. I would have liked to have seen some of that stuff, almost like how he would have gone through and learned that stuff.
I don't think you need to see it though. I think
no, you don't. But I mean, I kind of, there is part of me that would have liked to have kind of just seen a few more comedy beats. But also, I think it's an interesting choice to make, to go, okay, we're going to make this episode a comedic episode up to a point, which is very much in keeping with the rhythm of everything they've had so far this season.
Well, it kills two birds with one stone, because, you know, it's comedy, it's entertaining to watch, it's funny to watch, but it also allows all of this time to pass in mere moments for us, the viewer. You know, where it's literally centuries for Loki. And, you know, we find out later that, you know, it's not just the laws of physics and mechanics that he learns. He also, you know, learns how to master his new ability of controlling time and being able to not just slip through time, where he had earlier, where there would be two versions of himself walking around, but actually transfer his consciousness into his own body at an earlier point.
And also, you don't know what else he sort of figures out during that.
Well,
time.
you do find out later that he learns at least one new trick, you know.
But also, he learns the ins and outs of the TVA. You know, he's banging away on the computer there. He's doing the secret passwords and all that. He knows all that, and I liked that stuff. But then we get the utter defeat of, it doesn't matter what you do, at the end comes anyway. And we do get those two interesting quotes. So the first one, I've wasted time, time doth waste me, or doth time now waste me, which is from I believe Richard III, I think. And later on, the later quote is T.S. Eliot.
Well,
and there's very kind of,
that's when he actually, you know, so once he learns that, you know, no matter what he does, with the temporal loom, it will never and bypass, you know, what's supposed to happen.
I mean, that's kind of an interesting thing, because at that point I paused the episode and was like, okay, so we know they're going to figure out something. There's quite a big chunk of the episode to go. But it is a kind of scary moment where it's just like, oh yeah, like no matter what you do. I also loved Loki's quite bureaucratic intonation throughout those scenes. It's actually a sentence I thought I'd have to say to you, Liz, where he's guiding Victor Timely down the gangway, and he says, "Be brave. You're being so brave."
And he says it repeatedly while Timely's going down the gangway.
I loved it. I thought that was great. And the constant thing of, and the things you don't see, because there is that moment where he comes back and says, "Don't put the throughput multiplier down on the gangway; it will just roll off." So there's obviously been a 2 or 3 times where it's
right,
kind of,
or who even knows how many times where it's just rolled right off.
And like I liked that stuff. I thought that was really good and fun. But the fun can't last, of course, because
right.
the end of the world is coming. The end of time as we know it.
So he realizes, okay, well, because I can't solve the problem this way. My only choice is to go back and try and prevent Sylvie from killing He Who Remains, because that's when all of the timelines branched.
Now, I enjoyed this. I was quite surprised that we'd go back to this point. Although really I should have seen it coming. And I thought it was handled really well. But also you realise just how kind of playful and nonchalant Kang is being. R.I.P. HR. It's just like HWI. Yeah. Right. I like his kind of excuse me, nonchalance, his attitude in that whole sequence. And it's that kind of tips the hat that, this isn't going to be there is something else up his sleeve here. Also, did you notice something about the way he was dressed? Because he's wearing what I think are Victor Timely's tweed pants.
Really?
Yeah, if you look, his
I
didn't notice it the first time around, but underneath the purple cloak, he's got these sort of very tweed old style pants on, not tweed, but kind of twill material. And it's just like, I wonder if he is Victor. Do you know what I mean? Like it's Victor that gets kind of, because do we find out what happened to the Victor Timely variant? I mean, we'll talk about it in a minute, but and I wonder if he was supposed to be Victor and that just kind of got discarded along the way. I really like the sort of choice that he presents Loki with, which goes back to the first season where it's just like, yeah, you're going to have to sit on the throne ultimately, or you're going to have to kill her, or you're going to have to, allow all these other variants to come through. Do you think that if they'd allowed all the other variants to come through, Loki would have been able to achieve what he wanted to anyway? Because he says, no, I'll find a way. And I thoroughly believe that Loki being Loki, he would have.
I mean, what Timely, the choice Timely presents him with is basically like, kill Sylvie and preserve the sacred timeline, because otherwise, nothing, everything will cease to exist. Everyone will die. So, but Loki does come back with, no, I'm going to find another way to do it. They're all, this was one of my favorite scenes in the episode. When basically Loki, he's once again going through a time loop with Sylvie over and over. They're having the same fight, the same words flung at each other. She says, if you want to stop me, you'll have to kill me, over and over. And it keeps ending the same way. And finally, he kind of implores He Who Remains, can you do something? And He Who Remains, freezes time, or freezes Sylvie in time. And it's almost like, okay, well, now we're going to have a conversation with the grown-ups. And he, sort of says, oh, so you haven't figured out how to freeze time yet yourself. And I love this little exchange where, they kind of, start going back and forth, and He Who Remains is being kind of glib and kind of taunting him, almost saying like, this was always meant to happen. When she kills me, I always, knew that we'd wind up right back here. So when he says, see you soon to Sylvie after she stabs him, it really does mean, what he meant it to mean. And he basically, gives Loki this impossible choice and, basically is telling him, you have to do what I want you to do. And that's when Loki sort of shows his hand and actually freezes time himself and, kind of reveals actually, he says, what makes you so sure we haven't had this conversation before? So.
But I mean, then I don't see the point in necessarily continually arguing the point. He should have by then figured out what he was going to do, and he doesn't necessarily until right at the end. And that's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I guess, were you hoping that there'd be some rabbit out of the hat moment that Loki would kind of pull it all off?
In that scene, do you mean? Or
in the whole thing, like there'd be a moment where he would actually figure out, oh yeah, like here's what I can do, and I can still win. Because I think the problem with Loki is he's now trying to save everyone.
Right.
And it brings to mind, something from Age of Ultron for me, where, Cap says to the Scarlet Witch, it doesn't mean we get to, sometimes it means we don't get to save everybody. And, there's another thing I kind of want to talk about to do with the Avengers at the end, but we'll
because I kind of feel like, when you say, is there a way he could have pulled it off? But, when we talk about the end, he does pull it off.
He does, but at great sacrifice. He does make a sacrifice, which is
that's right. But he does, he pulls the rabbit out of the hat.
How do you feel about? I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about this because we've only been at this for like 17 minutes. This could be the shortest episode we do. How do you feel about the solution that he comes up with?
I mean, should we skip to that part now?
I don't know. It's up to you. You go. You lead the way. You tell me where we want to go next.
Well, I think, much like the series, we should take our time getting there.
Go on. Go for it.
Because I still think there's more to talk about first, in how we get there. Because he has to go through, countless, different scenarios before he comes to that conclusion.
Okay. Do you imagine there was one where he actually did kill Sylvie?
Possibly, but like it kind of, from what we see, no, I don't think he could bring himself to do it. He wants to believe there's another way.
And I'm still left kind of wondering about last week's episode where he said it's all centered around a person. And we don't quite figure out which person it is. Is it Sylvie? Because
I think you're still harping on with that because I totally don't think that it was a specific person. I think it was the people that he cares about. I think it encompasses those people. Because that's how I took it. He finally realizes that he cares about these people, and it's about it's not about what when where it's about the fact that and and this is there will be more to talk about in terms of that because I don't just want to talk about this episode. I kind of want to talk about the whole series.
Cool, go for it. I'm ready to be. What do you mean not? If not now, when? Come on, let's 20 minutes
after we get through the episode. Right.
We don't want to get through the episode just yet. We are getting through the episode right now. I don't know. I'm so confused. I'm as confused as I was watching this entire series. You're supposed to give me the answers. That's what you're here for.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. First, though, he goes through the motions with He Who Remains and realizes that, the only options that he's being presented with there are options that he doesn't want. But he seems like he's almost, ready to accept that the only way to save the universe, essentially, is to kill Sylvie. And so first he goes to talk to Mobius. He seems to have like sort of made a decision in his mind, or is trying to. And it's a really interesting point he goes back to, which is like their first meeting, essentially, in episode 1 of series 1, when they're sitting across the table from one another, and Mobius is about to play Loki, his greatest hits, the tape of his life, to show him, what his sacred timeline self had done and was going to do. And that's a really interesting point for him to go back to, because it's before Mobius knows him at all. He only knows him as a Loki variant who might be useful. And yet he still chooses that time to go and sort of implore Mobius for advice. They have an interesting conversation. Loki's essentially saying, what do you do, with an impossible choice?
I like the fact, I like the story that the Mobius relates to, which of course you realize is actually about Mobius. It is his own kind of story, really, about having to go back and kill a variant that was going to murder thousands. And it was just an eight-year-old boy. And he talks about how he made the decision not to and what that cost. And it like, I mean, one, you do realize that straight away that, oh no, he's talking about himself. And pushing Loki to make the hard choice, which at that point we still think is going to be killing Sylvie, right? I mean, I didn't necessarily have an inkling that the hard choice would be what it was.
But this was like I thought a really important conversation, with the way that it ends. Mobius relaying to him, that most purpose is more burden than glory. And glorious purpose has been the kind of the theme of the show in a way. And I loved in the pre-credits, or the previously on scene, the first thing we see is Loki from the Avengers movie in 2012, with the famous line, "I'm Loki, I'm burdened with glorious purpose," which he also says in the first episode of the series, which the first episode of the series, season 1, is titled Glorious Purpose, and which the final episode of the show is titled Glorious Purpose. And it takes him that long to realize, what this glorious purpose actually is. And, and the fact that he, has said, "I'm burdened with it," it's like he has to come to realize, and Mobius tells him straight out, it's, the glory, is going to take a back seat to the burden, because if you've really done something great, usually it's going to cost you. And that's when he has to go see Sylvie, and
I think it's interesting they brought it back to that, and I think it was a very clever way of bringing it back to that. Because we kind of posited that the glorious purpose would be remaking the universe, or at least the MCU, right? I mean, we kind of posited that idea,
which in a way is what happens.
It is what happens, kind of. Not quite in the way we predicted. we thought it would. Also, could we talk about the things that are left undone from this that never kind of get, like, Obi turns out to be nobody, or doesn't really. You're not really told who he is.
I never really had a big suspicion that he was going to be some big bad. I know a lot of people theorize that, but
not even that. He's just it just kind of. I thought there'd be more to that. So that was frustrating.
I didn't care. It didn't, it didn't like, I was fine with him just being who he was, and none of that. I really thought that it would have just been, unless we had another few episodes, there was just no reason for it.
Isn't it funny, folks, how much I probably feel like Loki right now, and Liz feels like He Who Remains, because Liz is always on the ball and kind of knows what's going to happen, and I'm always like, well, hold on. And I feel, Liz, that our journey throughout this series, these 6
has
episodes,
usually resulted in me being right. That's true.
Has resulted in an air of how can I put it? Pointlessness. No matter what we do, it all stays the same.
Well, I disagree.
Well, in a way, we'll get to it. Is there another way, before we talk about the ending, is there another way you would have liked for it to end?
I think it ended in the most satisfying way that it could have. Because I thought that, what they were building up to, and I thought it was clever sleight of hand that it really seemed like that was what they were building up to was that he would have to kill Sylvie, which would have been really tragic and sad, and again, actually might have made for a good ending.
Yeah.
To make that sacrifice, but for the show to really do justice to his character, it actually was so much more satisfying to see him sacrifice not just his own happiness as he might have, by killing Sylvie, but sacrifice himself for everyone else.
This is the thing I want to get to, because what we see him do is he goes down the gangway.
His clothes tear away to reveal this new outfit.
The princely outfit, the OG Loki outfit, really. The full sort of Asgardian regalia, because the horns come back.
Come back, but the horns this time are made of the same sort of metal as like the citadel at the end of time,
right?
With the black and the gold threading through it, and it's kind of notable that it's almost a similar outfit to what He Who Remains wears, rather than his previous Asgardian armor.
Okay,
there is no armor, and it suggests almost this kind of more peaceful look, because he has no armor. He's wearing slippers basically, and he's not, he doesn't look like he's going out to fight. It's but it's a play on his classic look, and I loved it. I thought it looked awesome.
And I like the idea of him rejuvenating the branches of time and holding them all, and in fact kind of almost holding them back, and becoming, he gets a throne. It's not necessarily, again, the throne you would have expected.
Yeah, I thought visually all of that was amazing. I thought it just was so, it looked beautiful, and there was this amazing score music playing, in the background. I think the composer, Natalie Holt, I think that she's fantastic.
And it is kind of, it's almost like Loki's theme, isn't it? It's that music is familiar. We've had it before. And going back to the beginning of the thing, where you're looking at the Marvel Studios logo almost backwards as it goes into inside the logo, and then you're
at the beginning of the episode. That was really cool.
Because we start outside and go in, whereas normally don't we start inside and come back out?
Yeah.
And the music is almost like a quasi backwards but slightly more regal version of the MCU theme by Giacchino, and I liked all that. But here's the thing that interests me, and is what I kind of just want to get to, with Loki doing this. Go all the way back to the Avengers, and you have that argument, that great scene where Loki's kind of worked the paranoia into everyone on the helicarrier, and Cap says to Iron Man, "You're not the one to make the sacrifice play." But that's exactly what Loki does, and I think in that moment, he becomes an Avenger. I think that's the sacrifice, and
yeah, I am so with you.
Yeah, and I
think it's
really
there are a lot of parallels actually, you know, to his, you know, to his story and Tony Stark's in a way. You know, they both get that, you know, like the guy who wouldn't make the sacrifice play.
Yeah, both very callous individuals.
Selfish, you know, self-serving, and, you know, and but they both come out of it really heroic, and, you know, and, you know, you and I had conversations throughout the season, you know, about my sort of, you know, nitpicking overall. I you know, it's like I like him being sort of a bad guy, and, you know, I like him playing both sides of the fence and everything.
This is what I sat there wondering as I was watching it, and I was just like, oh man, how disappointed is Liz going to be?
I'm not, though. I have to say, I'm really not. I couldn't be, like, you know, because I thought, okay, actually, this is such a great ending, and, like, you know, who knows what the future holds.
Yeah.
But I feel like if this was the end of his story, it would be a really great ending. I hope it's not, but I feel like you really, you know, as far as any character in the MCU, I think he's had the best arc.
Yes.
He starts as, you know, as just a straight up villain, and, you know, then he, you know, well, a troubled villain, you know, with good, you know, and like he becomes an anti-hero, becomes a character we all love, has a redemption, but, you know, it's too late, and he dies. And then, you know, we come back to him here, and he has to have that redemption arc all over again under different circumstances. But, you know, like the ending that we get for him, really, you know, it's that Ouroboros thing again, where it really comes full circle. You know, everything that he thought he wanted, you know, a throne, and, you know, all this power, he gets it, but not in the way that he ever thought he would, and not without this great cost. And, you know, it's just really, you know, just a really, like, beautiful ending, you know, for his character. And he does, you know, he really is, you know, maybe the most heroic character in the MCU, you know, at this point. You know, he sacrifices, you know, everything, you know, that meant anything to him. You know, what he's reiterated over and over is actually that he just doesn't want to be alone. And, you know, he winds up alone, but, you know, you can see that there's some sort of satisfaction to him knowing that, you know, the people he cares about get to live their lives. I went back and watched episode 1 of season 1 again, right after watching this episode. And it's actually, I would really recommend doing it to anyone who just watched this episode, because you actually see how beautifully it was all set up right there in episode 1. So many things pay off in this episode.
Really?
Yes, okay. So many things. It's like, you know, it's almost like having a conversation with itself, you know, which is really interesting because both episodes have the same title. And we just see, you know, where he started, and, you know, the things he claims to want, and, you know, where he's coming from. And you know, the Loki we see, you know, at the end of the series, it's like, you know, all of that comes around, and, you know, it feels really satisfying.
Okay.
Yeah. you know, I just, you know, I really tip my hat to the writers, you know, I think, and everyone involved with this episode. I just, you know, I think they did such a spectacular job of giving it this really, really wonderful, satisfying ending. That was very bittersweet and tragic, but also, you know, really fitting and right.
Okay, that's interesting. I think I'm going to try and do that. You know, this week then. And
I would watch it, like, you know, soon after watching the episode, because it's like, it really, you know, it works really well that way, actually.
Oh, amazing! Thank you. Like I overall, I'm really happy with the kind of the way it turned out. You know, time loop stuff is always fun to watch, and a lot of time loop stuff is always done for comedy. Like, I don't think I've ever watched a time loop film where it hasn't been. I mean, I'm sure you might be able to name one for me, but I don't think I could think of one where it's not done for comedy. You know, when you look at things like Happy Death Day, but we were talking about teen, like they're normally done for teen movies, and we were talking about this sort of off air recently. I seem to remember we had a conversation because I was saying, I seem to have like caught up and watched. Oh no, in fact, I have seen one film where it was done for tragedy. So one of the films I watched in my sort of recent season of teenage time loop movies was based around a tragedy. But normally it's always done for kind of laughs, and I think they played on that very well in this season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Again, where does it leave us? Because there's no post-credit scene.
Well, no, which I think was a really good choice.
Right.
I really agree with that.
And there's no indication, you know, what's going to happen with the Council of Kangs and all this kind of stuff. You don't see them. You don't see anyone.
Well, you know, interestingly, I feel like, you know, this kind of presents them with an opportunity if they wanted to take it. If they, you know, if Jonathan Majors' Kang needed to be written out, this would actually be a way to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, who knows what's going to happen there, but you know, they could use this as a way to kind of sidestep using him again at all.
Yeah. And I mean, do you feel it was partly done because of that?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that, you know, it's just a byproduct, because I think when they were filming this, you know, those issues didn't exist.
I mean, like, I've still got to say, problems aside, his acting is superb.
Yep, absolutely. I thought he was terrific in this episode. Like I said, amazing. One of my favorite, you know, scenes in the, you know, in the whole episode was the conversation between the two of them. You know, and I loved like his range in that, you know, because he, you know, he starts being the, you know, kind of taunting, you know, almost, you know, comedic figure that we met in last year's finale, or the previous finale. But then when, you know, when they actually start to really talk, he kind of drops that facade and we just see them have a conversation.
And also what's interesting is he seems to have been in the same position as Loki at some point in trying to find a way out of all of this and couldn't. And it almost kind of, I wonder if it sort of mirrors what he went through with Renslayer. Because, you know, he's clearly very enamored of Renslayer. And we know canonically for the comics, they're very much in love. And
it was interesting to see Renslayer, like, you know, during that ending too. You know, she had been, you know, cast into the void, and we see her sort of wake up on this hill, and what did you make of that? Like, there's a pyramid in the distance, which, is like, oh, is that a Ramatut reference?
It could be, but I wondered if she's kind of in the. Do you remember the sort of wasteland from season 1 where the other Lokis are?
Right.
Because you see something coming at her from
This
that's
purple
off
light,
camera,
which is like,
which
is it Eliath or
yeah,
is it a reference to Kang? Like,
it could be. Like it did kind of remind me of Eliath, but yeah, perhaps it is, as you say, it's Ramatut, and
because it's purple, like, that's his color, so
it would be interesting to see when and if that ever gets picked up.
I mean, do you think there's going to be another season of this show?
No,
neither do I.
It's done. I think it's done. And in a way, the real rug pull would to maybe be to do another season, but for it to be Sylvie or one of the other Lokis, or maybe all of the other Lokis. That might be interesting. That might be fun. And certainly by its very nature of the wildly different, not necessarily personalities, but variants on personalities, it might actually, lean into the comedy that we've had in this season. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they seem to be doing well at making shows that kind of hit a very broad. Excuse me, sorry, we're recording this at sort of 10:30 at night, folks, and I'm knackered, so sorry for yawning. So they're recording it. They've got like a broad kind of scope of stuff in that we've had the serious shows, i.e.,
Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Thank you. We've had the lighter shows, Hawkeye,
Ms. Marvel,
and Miss Marvel. And I mean, obviously, I'm really kind of annoyed that their last attempt at a serious show was so kind of, such a damp squib. And in fact, someone, I can't remember who I was talking to today, who was like saying, yeah, Secret Invasion, what a waste. What a waste of such a good story.
Yeah.
But I don't think they've wasted anything here. I think they've done really well.
I think that this probably, this and WandaVision probably stand up as the, the best, of the series. And
I don't know. I really loved Hawkeye and Miss Marvel.
I did too. But like in terms of of breaking the sort of MCU mold and doing something completely, unexpected and different, I feel like those two shows stand out as the most inventive and the most I mean, the MCU so constantly gets accused of being kind of homogenous, and I feel like, no, like you could easily point to those as like examples of something like that really, doesn't resemble anything else that I think the MCU has done.
I think some of the movies got a bit homogenous. I think you could level that argument there. Or certainly a lot of the beats got homogenous. And I wonder now if they're learning to try and do something a bit different within those contexts. Like I never really feel like it lives up to its potential of we've kind of hired this great indie director and we're going to let them do what they do. And it's just like, no, you're not. You're absolutely not going to let them do what they do.
No, but
I think that's a problem. But anyway, that's actually a conversation for another time.
For another time, yeah.
So, and speaking of which, Liz, I don't know if you've seen the recent article in Variety on the sort of trouble in the MCU mill.
I have.
Right. Have you read that article?
Yeah.
I think we should. I think in the next week or so we should do a sort of Patreon special and talk about that arc
Okay.
and talk about
All right. Yeah. I mean, you heard me like just raring to like dive into the
and that's right. But I
defense
don't think it's for this show. I would like us to discuss that because
Yeah.
I think we would probably both have some really good, interesting points to discuss and argue over there.
Yeah, let's do it.
But I've really loved this show. I've really loved doing this show as well. But I've really loved this series of Loki.
Yeah, and I think that any nitpicks I had about things earlier in the season, because I did occasionally have nitpicks, you know, with you know, some of the pacing I just thought it was moving so fast, we didn't get a lot of time for character. But any of the problems that I may have had, I feel like, you know, were just completely washed away, you know, by the finale we got. I feel like, you know, it all brought us to the point where the character needed to be, you know, to get that great ending and, you know, have this, you know, really wonderful character transformation.
Yeah, I agree. It does. It is kind of. It's not the only place Loki could have gone, but it feels like it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And I think that's the sign of a good ending is when you can't necessarily see it coming.
Which I didn't, you know, and like I love that. I think that was, you know, that's what really like bowled me over. You know, was you know I did not foresee, you know, that being the perfect ending to the show, but it was.
I think you and I should get out of the prediction game, Liz. I think
no.
I think
what were we talking about?
We should just move into just pure criticism because we got this one so wrong.
Well, you know, I challenge anyone to say they saw that coming. I don't think so.
Very true, very true. And actually, I'm trying to think now. Am I disappointed that some of the things didn't get addressed? Like some of the things weren't revealed to be a thing. And you do have to kind of watch that because I think if you're just constantly waiting, it's like watching, you know, it's like M. Night Shyamalan. Marvel movies have become the M. Night Shyamalan movies of this generation. Because you remember how everyone was always, every time M. Night Shyamalan did a movie, it's all anyone could talk about, the twist. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. And, you know, and it was just like, when you think about it, if you sit down and watch and are observing during an M. Night Shyamalan movie, most of it's freaking obvious. It's obvious what it's bloody going to be. It's obvious he's dead. Well, a bit late now, Liz. I can give a monkey. You know, it's obvious they're not living in a, you know, the time period.
Spoiling M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Liz, they've had over.
I don't care if you're 20 years old.
Hey,
no spoilers.
Hey, I don't know if you've ever seen The Empire Strikes Back, Liz, but boy, have I got a reveal for you. But you know, and I think they've become those, and I think I'm part of that, and I worry about being part of that, and kind of always wanting something to be something else. And I think that's sometimes a bad thing. I think sometimes the art should just be taken at face value. Like comics, the comics should just be taken at face value. And I think part of what ruins comics is, not ruins them, you know, it's ruined comics, but part of what spoils comics for me sometimes, or at least detracts from the pleasure, is this fact that it's all kind of, it's all leading up to this, or it's all leading up to that, it's all leading up to that. It's like, no, I want it to lead to where this particular series or storyline ends in a satisfying and interesting way. I don't want 150 strings left dangling. But at the same time,
you know, I mean, funnily enough, there were about 1 million strings left dangling around Loki. And I felt that actually, despite, you know, having big ripple effects, I'm sure, you know, to the rest of the MCU, it really felt like it was its own thing, and like they weren't being telegraphed anything that was supposed to excite you about the next thing. I thought, I really liked that there was only one post-credit scene in the whole thing, and that was in episode 1. And the fact that they did not do that, at the end, I think was like, it gave you that sense of finality. And I thought, I just think it's smart. I think, the post-credit scenes are always fun in Marvel movies and TV shows, but sometimes it's better not to. In Endgame, they didn't put a post-credit scene. And again, that was like, this is the end of this story. And I thought that really applied well here.
I mean, I am ultimately kind of happy with this went.
We have to, before we wrap it up. Talk about the about Yggdrasil, the World Tree.
Yes, because that's where we end up. We kind of get it. It becomes something new, and it makes the kind of symbolism that we've seen before within the TVA mean something. And we realize, of course, this was where it was always meant to go. So, I mean, there is something in that Kang, or He Who Remains, must have had an inkling that this is exactly what was going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, how do you feel about that?
I thought, I didn't see that coming in yet. It's perfect. It's like, that was something that was discussed, in the first Thor movie. It is part of Norse mythology. And when Thor and Jane Foster have that conversation under the stars, he tells her about the World Tree and, how it, basically is, the structure of the universe.
But do you think, I mean, like, obviously they're now talking about a fourth Thor movie, and there are actually a lot of rumblings that the MCU is kind of going to go backwards, that they want to go back to Downey. They want a new Thor movie, a fourth Thor 5. No, 5.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is 5.
5.
It is 5.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. No, it's
as you can see, it's because we've forgotten about that terrible fourth movie.
Well, it didn't have Loki in it, so it's definitely not my favorite.
And also there was that thing where it wasn't a very good movie.
I would love a 5th Thor movie, and I would love Loki to be in it. A lot of people are now saying, "Oh no, he's gone. This is it. This is the end." And if it was the end, like I already said, it's like a beautiful ending. But I really want to see him in another Thor movie.
I actually haven't looked at a lot of the sort of post finale scuttlebutt. I haven't done that.
I have just a little.
So, I will over the next few days, and probably regret that there was a bunch of stuff we could have incorporated into this episode. But there you go. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. But ultimately, I've enjoyed it.
I loved the ending.
Yeah, I thought it was an excellent, and there wasn't a bad episode in this show.
No, I loved the series. I especially loved this episode. And I this is like my favorite character, and
totally.
it was really important to me that they give him a good ending, and I feel like they really did right by me.
And also, ultimately, no character dies really in comics or comic-based media. No character dies. So we'll see what happens in the next iteration. Maybe the 5th Thor movie will be a journey to the World Tree to reclaim Loki, and maybe it'll be something like that. Who knows? But yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to. I'm always looking forward to see what comes next. But again, I always always worried, is the anticipation over kind of tipping on against the actuality of it? And sometimes I think it is, and sometimes I think I'm a bit guilty of that. But there you go. That's just me. That's my burden to to bear.
Right? Yeah, you're.
And of course, the audience, all 12 of you. That's that's your burden as well. But I've really enjoyed doing this. We've got to talk about the Marvels coming up next week. So next, the movie is out right now, I believe. Is that right? Is it out now?
It is out now. Have you not seen it?
I have not seen it. I haven't had the chance. Been doing some extra shifts at the comic store, so I haven't had a chance. You have seen it, or you haven't?
Seen it.
You
I have. Of course, I have. It's been out for like a day.
Yeah, of course. Can I just ask, just for a bare minimal, did you enjoy it?
I did.
Did you enjoy it more than Captain Marvel? Because I know we had some issues with that one. And...
I did.
Right. Okay. So next week, Liz and I will have a conversation about Captain Marvel. I hope next Saturday we'll be able to kind of. Oh, there you go. My chair's just almost collapsed.
That would be a way to end it.
Hey, I'm losing weight, folks. I promise. So yeah, next Saturday, Liz and I will have a conversation about the Marvels. I'm probably going to see it on either Monday evening or Tuesday. So we're recording this Saturday night. So hopefully I'll be able to kind of catch it really quickly. And then from there, we're probably looking at the next one of these we come back for won't be until January, which is Echo, of course. Now, I've heard something interesting about the structure of this show. It's going to be a 5-episode dump, like all at once.
Really?
I've heard. I don't know if that's true.
So they're going like full tilt Netflix style. Yeah.
So guys, if anyone knows whether or not that's true, please leave us a comment in the comment section on YouTube or on any of the podcasting channels, or just drop us a line on social media. But I have heard that they are going to go for a full series dump.
Oh, I hope that's not the case.
So, Liz, it makes it so much easier for us, though, because we won't have to do 5 weeks of this. We can just do it in one go. 1, maybe 2 episodes if we fancy a bit of anticipation.
Okay. All right. I mean, we'll definitely talk about that.
Yeah. Echo will be an interesting one. And actually, because it's not coming out to January, it'll give me some time to reread some Echo stuff and Daredevil stuff. They have actually just republished a sort of Saga of Echo single volume.
Yes.
That has some Daredevil
kind of like a bunch of key stories featuring Echo. She, there's lots of really great Daredevil featuring Echo.
Yeah. And I think that's where she was best. Also, though, she does pop up in Brian Michael Bendis's Moon Knight.
Yes, that's true.
And she was great in that. And I think I've got a review of that on. If you click on the resources button on the Comic Crush, there is a Moon Knight tab and drop down menu that features a bunch of stuff I did for Moon Knight. And in fact, I am still continuing doing Moon Knight stuff. I've just been very, very slow. But you'll find a sort of review for Bendis's Moon Knight, which I recall very much enjoying. So yeah, Liz, that's it. We're done.
Yep.
So next week you can look forward to the Marvels, and hopefully we'll try and squeeze in. I'll talk to my young compatriot here about squeezing in a Patreon special on is Marvel screwed or not. What side of the argument she'll fall?
Yeah.
I hope you've noticed this. You probably can't, because the contrast in the image is so bad on my laptop. But I have worn green, Loki green, every week. We've done this.
I approve.
It's as close as I get to a slogan T-shirt.
Well, I wear black just for being a villain.
Just because you're a miserable little goth. Let's face it.
My much like Loki in his earlier,
Well,
earlier state.
That's all from me and Wednesday Adams. You can follow the Comic Crush at the Comic Crush. I am at Comic Crush Paul if you want to follow me. You can find us on Threads at the Comic Crush, on Hive at the Comic Crush, on Blue Sky at the comiccrush.bsky.social. Liz, you can follow it just that one one address there on Twitter, Instagram. You should also check out the weekly podcast, weekly new comics videos she does for That's Entertainment in Massachusetts. Great store, and you should check it out if you ever get out there. Yeah, catch up with us. Like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. It's all helpful. And we'll be back soon with more podcasts and videos. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.